And joining me now for a closer look at what's playing itself out on that market scene is Muhammed Wagley from Sasfin Wealth. Quite an interesting picture there that we are seeing. Muhammad, the JSE is red again. We did get a bounce yesterday, but very, very short-lived there. But the Rand, interestingly, remains on top of its game, sitting at just above 18 Rand 60 against the US dollar. Are the local equities and the local currencies just trading on different fundamentals at this point? What's going on there?
Truth be told, Dinati, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. But, I really can't actually make sense of it, truth be told. I think we're seeing quite a bit of risk-off sentiment, so that should favor dollar strength, but that's not really what we're happening. Funny enough, we are seeing gold strength, so the safe haven has been doing well from that perspective. I'm, truth be told, not necessarily too sure why the Rand has actually held up as well as it has. I feel it probably shouldn't be this strong, realistically.
And really quite interestingly, it's holding up even though the oil price is, at highs that we haven't seen in a while again. And, obviously that should fuel inflation concerns, but the Rand really just seems to be holding up. And actually just talking about oil, I'm wondering how you would play oil at this point. Is it a thing of, should investors go in hoping for more momentum on these gains on the oil price? Or if you're not in oil already, if you're not playing out that kind of investment, then the bus has just left you?
No, I wouldn't say that at all. I think, there's definitely scope for some exposure, not just in oil, I think in energy in general. I think within the coming sort of, let's call it the medium term, or rather the short to medium term, I think oil is actually, oil and rather energy in general is poised to succeed. I think the bounce that we're seeing recently, carrying us almost all the way to 90, was on the back of sort of escalating tensions that we're seeing in the Middle East. Chances are that's not going to end anytime soon, and the threat of escalation is always there. But in addition to that, I think, perhaps from a valuation perspective, it is looking quite a bit attractive, not just oil, I think energy in general.
Yeah. Would Sasol be one of those? Because, for a while, Sasol just did not respond to movements in the oil price, where investors were hoping that when we do get highs in the oil price, Sasol would take part. But for some reason, it is now taking part. But I know that Sasol, has been quite a polarizing stock at this point because of its own issues, operational issues that it has in the company, and also just the split between oil and chemicals. Would Sasol be, one of the stocks that you are participating in now to kind of benefit from the momentum that we are seeing in oil?
So look, definitely one to look at, but I think for the reason that you mentioned earlier, there used to be sort of a well-defined link in terms of Sasol and the oil price. Yeah. That kind of then faded away. As you say, we're seeing a bit of that coming back, but really you want something like directly linked to the energy stocks. And perhaps, Sasol can still serve as a proxy, but I'd probably be looking offshore for that sort of exposure, really.
All right. Well, talking about offshore, Sanlam is also looking offshore. It does obviously have a presence in India. And actually, if I remember correctly, even at its, with its last results, it actually reported quite good momentum in its India operation. And now it wants a bigger piece of that pie. What do you make of that? Of course, you know that India has been one of the economies that investors have been flocking to at this point.
No, absolutely. We see massive growth in India. You mentioned those Shriram acquisitions a little bit earlier. And, this has been sort of a big part of their strategy is to, globally diversify. They've got some India exposure. They've got some Africa exposure as well. And they've been doing quite well in that respect. Within the context of the local market, they've actually been one of the bright spots. They've performed incredibly well. That trading statement came out not too long ago. And really, the numbers were phenomenal. So it paints a picture of a company in good health, despite quite a challenging environment. So definitely one to keep an eye out for. Really like what they're doing over at Sanlam.
Yeah. I know that, in the insurance industry, that sector of the JSE is seen as quite unloved and quite cheap, actually, when looking at the valuations. And I'm wondering if, Sanlam would be, one that you pick out of the rest, or if there's just a general optimism about how cheap the sector is, but also just how good the fundamentals of that sector are.
No, spot on. Look, so I think a big part of the reason why these insurers are a bit unloved is most of us really don't understand the numbers.
True,
they're
so
a bit
complex.
clever for us. Yes, absolutely. But, the truth is that the sector is looking attractive. Really, loads of sectors are looking quite attractive. But when you look at the numbers, you look at the strength of the management team, I think this is a particularly attractive company within the sector. Much has been made about how terribly South African companies are performing. And here we've got a company that's actually doing really well despite the challenging environment. So it's good to see. And, you've got to attribute a lot of credit to the management team over there.
All right. Grindrod Shipping, very, very interesting there. A surge of more than 20% in its share price. I understand that it did announce a proposal for a capital reduction. Just give us more insight on that, and also just the reaction that we've gotten from investors so far today.
The investors love it. It's the top performing share today.
Yeah.
And really, this is on the back of the offer, which was about $14.25, dollars, because quotes, it's obviously listed on the NASDAQ as well. If I convert that, that's about 266 Rand a share, which is really attractive. And I think really the share is just flying on the back of that. One of the few that are flying today, really.
Yeah, indeed, but not translating to the broader market. Before we get to your stock pick, Muhammed, let's reflect on some of the counters that have found favor with some of your industry peers.
I've been pretty negative about the South African economy in general. But in case I'm wrong and things start going better, then the obvious choice would be infrastructure, and the obvious share would be Robex. So it's highly cyclical, so it's almost like a commodity. Don't forget to sell when it rallies, if it rallies. But yeah, as I said, if I'm too overly pessimistic, just in case I'm wrong, I think Robex is sitting at a good valuation and also technically at a good point.
My pick for today is Advotech. It's been on a bit of a run. Earnings have grown really well, but it just seems to be a business that's executing incredibly well in a space where demand is huge. I think demand is inflexible. The competition is struggling to a greater or less extent. You've seen some of the competitors being taken out of the market, and education, the way they've invested in it is an absolute need. They've also participated very well in the ex-SA world, so they've opened for themselves another growth avenue in case SA does slow down, and it's not particularly expensive. So to me, it's quite a predictable, cash generative, high dividend pair that's continuing to grow. Again, like Rikus, yeah, if SA is to do well, yeah, I guess a company like Advotech would.
My stock pick recommendation is our ARC Investments. I find their fund to be well focused. It's also efficient and well diversified, which has proven beneficial in navigating the current challenging economic climate. As far as I know, the stock is trading around 500 cents per share. And just to dive a little bit more into that portfolio, my choice to back this stock is influenced by their investments in two businesses, TimeBank and Rain. These two businesses are strategically positioned to address two critical challenges that I think offer a significant business opportunity in South Africa. Number one being providing cheaper alternative data for internet usage. That's really a very big challenge for South African consumers. And secondly, promoting financial inclusion in the fintech era. The fundamentals of these two companies, particularly TimeBank, I think reminds me of Capitec Bank back in the 2000s. So that's actually based on that, that's my stock pick for today.
All right, quite interesting ones there in different sectors. Let's start off with Raubex. Rikus there says he's been pessimistic about the South African economy, but if things actually turn out right, then he'd choose Raubex. Of course, Raubex has been seen as one of the shining spots there in that construction sector. Would you be as optimistic or not?
Yeah, well, you know what? I think the logic is really solid. A play on infrastructure does make sense. I think just to add to what he mentioned earlier, Sunrail's got about $20 billion worth of tenders coming in soon, perhaps even a little bit more. Robex should be a big beneficiary in that respect. But again, this is one you'll have to be quite deliberate about. It's not necessarily going to be a long-term play. You'll have to be deliberate about getting in and getting out. I quite like it, truth be told. Then I think we had, was it Advitech after that?
Advitech, yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, you can go into
Brilliant.
that.
Perfect. No, so I really do like Advitech. Had a look at the numbers when they came out a couple of weeks ago. They were stellar. Really like them. They've got so many things working in their favor. Population growth probably being the obvious one there. They're now really well diversified from a geographic perspective as well. The growth is there. They pay good dividends. Management has an excellent track record of executing their plans. Really like Advitech. So it's quite a good one. I liked Robex as well. And then that takes me to the last one over here, which was African Rainbow Capital, ARC Investment. So this is quite an interesting one. I really like the two brands which the gentleman mentioned, Rain and Time Bank. But I think what we've seen is that there's quite a bit of pressure that we've seen on African Rainbow Capital. And I think that's just because it seems the market doesn't necessarily agree with Rain's valuation. I think we think it's a bit too richly valued. That's what's put a bit of pressure on them. But that being said, we're seeing quite a bit of good momentum there for African Rainbow Capital. And truth be told, really the other two shares as well. So we've got 3 local shares today as stock picks. And you know what, truth be told, I like them. I like all 3 of them quite a bit.
All right. Well, let us get to your stock pick for today. What are you hanging your hat on?
Yeah, so I would say I'm less bold than the 3 previous analysts that you had. I'm going offshore, and I will be going for Adobe as my stock pick this week. Now, look, truth be told, in a market sort of carrying such momentum, especially when you look at these tech stocks and things like that on the American stock market, I think within the context of quality companies, you've got to look at some of the tickers that are trading at relatively attractive levels currently. Now, I think at current levels, around $500 a share, it would be a good opportunity to get some Adobe exposure. They've been under quite a bit of pressure on the back of OpenAI unveiling Sora. You might remember that's the text-to-video creation tool, came out sometime in February. On the back of this, investors were concerned that Photoshop and maybe some of the other applications might be vulnerable to this technology. But, you know, Adobe expects AI to actually help their addressable market reach almost $300 billion in 2027. And that's up $100 billion from their 2024 estimate. So again, you know, a lot of that going to be driven by AI synergies and things like that. Still quite a bit of room for growth. I think at $500 a share, good levels for an entry point here in Adobe. But again, you know, I mentioned energy as well a little bit earlier. I've got a bit of a fetish for tech, you know, so that's why I kind of levitate towards those companies.
Love it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights today on what is currently driving investor sentiment. That was your midday market update with Muhammed Wagley from Sasfin Wealth.